Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends. Today we have another in this little series that I've kind of interspersed throughout the recent episodes on self-love and how coaching and self-love can transform your marriage and actually your life. And today we have another special guest, an interview, a conversation that I had with her. So she's going to share lots with you. You're going to hear her story, and I'm really excited to share her with you. So let's dive in. We are so lucky today to have one of my amazing, wonderful, awesome clients, Kathryn. And she's going to be sharing a little bit of her story and experience with what we sort of playfully called I suck syndrome, right, Kathryn?
Yep.
And how you shifted that and sort of stepped into more and more what we might call, what I've been calling lately, self-love. I'm not sure how much you and I actually use that language, but a lot of the work was really around that. And then, of course, how that affected things for you inside of yourself and in your marriage. So I'm so grateful for your courage and your willingness to be here and share your story. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here.
So tell me a little bit about what your experience of I suck syndrome was, and maybe sometimes still might be at moments, right? And then maybe like what that sounded like to you, what it felt like to you, and how, of course, it affected you and your marriage.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely don't feel like I have conquered it completely, but I do think I've made a lot of strides in improvement for sure. And for me, like the I suck syndrome, I was always taking things really personally and feeling too much responsibility for things out of my control, and also just like the random things that kind of like went wrong. If anything did happen, I just like couldn't help like blaming myself, or if we got in an argument, then I always felt like it was my fault.
Yes.
And so it was like descending, I call it like it kind of just felt like going into this like deep pit of shame.
Yes.
Where I was like placing blame on myself, and then it would kind of like spiral into this like self-loathing soup.
Yeah, totally.
And it just caused so much strife for my husband and I, just because like I would start getting these extreme feelings and I like couldn't vocalize them. And then he would try like calming me or talking me out of it, but he just couldn't like get me out of that space. And so it just kind of created so much frustration for both of us and a lot of miscommunication. And we both just like we felt like we couldn't talk to each other, because if he said something and I took it the wrong way, then it just turned into this like huge fiasco. So he felt like he couldn't tell me anything, and I just like didn't know how to respond, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember a few times like talking about how also one of the things in that communication that would come from that place in you, right? Like when you were feeling that shame or that guilt or in that soup, right? Like sometimes your reaction would be to kind of close down, right? And then sometimes also it sounded like, and you correct me where I'm wrong, but that you'd kind of want to like get defensive. Yeah.
Yeah. I got defensive, and it kind of a lot of times, and it kind of just made it to where I was even feeling like more shame and guilt over like getting defensive.
Yeah. That vicious cycle, right?
Yeah. I kind of just hated the way I responded to him.
Yeah. I remember you saying like, early on, like, I just don't like who I'm being.
Yeah, and I just couldn't express my like feelings or my emotions in like a controlled, like vulnerable way. It was all just extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. And like a lot of the source of that, as we looked at it, right, was this I suck syndrome, as we named it. And like for you specifically, I mean, that sounded and that sounded like which is really common. Things like and you add to this if you want to, like I suck, right? It's my fault. We called these your greatest hits, right? Yeah. Like it, oh, there was one that I remember that cracked me up. Like, I mean, obviously it's not funny, like when it's actually going on, but it was so cute when you said it. It's like, I'm a weenie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. So things like that. Oh, and something's wrong with me, right? Or
or I'm too emotional.
I'm too sensitive.
Too crazy, kind of.
Yeah, I'm too XYZ, right? There was like, I'm too, yeah. Yes. I think one of the things and that we kind of uncovered as we went along was like, these things are all self-judgments, right? Mm-hmm. There was a lot of self-judgment there in your thinking. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's probably what I've been trying to work on the most is just sort of like learning how to deal with the feelings that I do have in a more like responsible way. And just like being more okay with how I do respond to things and just kind of working on my self-love, for instance.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. Like accepting, right? Instead of just judging, like I'm too emotional, right? Like accepting that you have emotions. And like I remember earlier on, what that you said? It was like, oh, like you were really judging yourself for being in for being in a bad mood. And like your idea was like, I should never be in a bad mood, right? Like it was a standard you held for yourself. Like I shouldn't be upset. I shouldn't be unhappy. Right. But then of course, what we found out is when you had that, like, not only did you have the grumpy mood, right, but then you had this like judgment of yourself and the shame that came from it.
Yes. Yeah. And then like working on that also helped me to work a little bit because I had like a rule that like my husband could never be in like a bad mood.
Yeah.
And so like working on that myself also helped me to like allow him to have that too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I love that you just mentioned the rule, right? Because I think that was for you, you had a lot of rules or what we could call standards for yourself, like that you really, they were like impossible to live up to standards, right? Like I shouldn't be unhappy ever. Right. It's like, well, that's not human. Right. So of course, what happens is like, when we have these kind of standards for ourselves, we're always going to fall short. And then we're going to then tell ourselves we suck because we are not meeting the ideas that we have of who we should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned a little bit about how you worked on this, and we can look at that a little bit more in a minute, but I'm just curious, like, I know that there's still room to grow in this way. And I would say I even still have room to grow in this way, because I think these negative ways of seeing ourselves, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast, like they are a part, like they're a self-protective way of being, which sounds crazy, right? But they're part of our like almost like survival mechanism, right? Like if we think back to way in the beginning of our being humans, human beings living in tribes and such, like to be unaccepted by the tribe meant death. So we developed certain sort of brain and nervous system ways of making sure we were disciplining ourselves to be good people and follow the rules, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think self-criticism is a mechanism of that. Yeah. to try to keep us surviving. So all that to say is like, I think it's a very, very, very human thing. And most of us have it in us always to some small degree, but you've come so far in how to be with yourself and be more loving with yourself and accepting of yourself and supportive of yourself. Like you've come such a long way. So I'm curious if what we've been talking about is kind of like the before for you, what is the after like in terms of how you feel in and about yourself and how different things are in your marriage? Now that
I feel like there have been a lot of like really good changes. Like in our marriage, it's allowed us to have just like better and deeper conversations where like we can actually discuss our feelings. My husband has been more open with his like what he's thinking and like how he feels about certain things.
Oh yeah.
And I've learned to be more vulnerable, which has helped our conversations a lot.
Yeah.
We do argue, I feel less blame and shame and guilt. And for myself, I feel and think better about myself than I have in a long time. And I'm more like okay with feeling like I'm not perfect. So I'm just a lot happier.
Yeah.
More at ease and calm than I have been in a long time.
I love that so much. I mean, both of those things are huge. So I just want to again celebrate you for that. Cause I know, you spent time and energy and focus on working on that in yourself. Do you have an example of like, maybe of like a real incident like recently where you were able to see that difference?
Yeah. Like probably like a week or so ago, my husband, we were, starting to have like a discussion kind of, and I could sense myself feeling like I was getting maybe a little bit defensive. And my husband was able to say like, hey, look, like I'm trying to share this with you. And it just like clicked over in my brain, that's when I need to be like more understanding and like listen. And he's trying to share something with me. And so it just like, we actually had like a real conversation, where we could talk about our feelings and like, I could have more understanding of what was going on with him. And I think that really just comes down to like, there just being more trust between us. Like he knows that I'm now capable of listening and having things to say when he lets me know that that's what's going on. And like, that's just a huge change from like how it used to be.
Yeah, I love it. It's beautiful. And how do you think, like, I guess sort of to get into that a little bit more, like, how do you think, like, how have you gotten to the place where you can have more ability to listen? That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, I think honestly, like one thing is like, it comes down to probably like one of the tips I have, which I've kind of come up with, like thinking of the way that I want to treat other people like every day. And it's like kind of like a mantra, like I want to be patient and understanding. And so kind of like go around thinking that. And then, I try to put that into my interactions. So like, I just, if somebody has something to say, I'm like, want to react patient and understanding. I want to listen, patient, understanding. But that also means that I have to do that for myself too.
Yes.
Which is nice. Like, I feel like overall it's like changed my outlook on a lot of conversations and just like a lot of life.
Being patient and understanding with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have any like further explanation of like what that kind of looks like? Like if someone's like, well, that sounds cool, but like, how do you do that?
I not really. It's kind of just like whenever, you know, like if I come home, like I kind of just think before I walk through the door, like I'm going to be patient and understanding. And so then no matter what my husband says to me, while he's doing dishes or whatever, in a bad mood, then I just like have to be patient and calm and like just take it how it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that's coming to my mind around that is like showing up as who you want to be, right? Like stepping into being patient and understanding, because that's who you've decided consciously who you want to be, right? It's like that actually is like, we could call that a gift to you. That is actually a way of being loving to yourself, right? Yeah. Because you're allowing that. And of course it's practicing, right? When you're like, I'm going to be this way, it's like practicing doing that. It's not always easy, right?
Yeah. But if I can say like, this is who I am, it allows me to respond in a way that I like better. And then I also just, if that's who I am, I also have to be that with myself. So it helped a lot.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, again, like going back to like you starting to step out of so much self-judgment, right? Or like, and you tell me where I'm wrong, but like starting to become first aware of the judgments that you had of yourself, and then starting to question them and think about yourself differently. Yeah. And like, because of that, and we'd call that more self-acceptance. We could call that stepping into more self-love too. And as you get better at that, it's easy to take things less personally, like be less defended, we could call it, which allows us to listen, as you were saying, and be more patient, right? Yeah. Because we're not believing that yucky stuff about ourselves as much. So we're not like having this internal like shaming session, right? That actually keeps us defended, right? Like you said before, like getting more vulnerable, like that allows you to be, in my language, like softer, more open, more patient, more understanding. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So that was definitely part of your work, as was being with your feelings in a really different way.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any other things around like being with your feelings that you might like tips or anything you might offer as someone who might kind of have this I suck syndrome a little bit at the moment?
As far like through like being with my feelings, it's more just like being able to notice kind of what is going on, and be able to name those feelings and kind of identify like why I've been triggered, and then just kind of giving myself some space to kind of just work through that has probably worked the best.
Yeah, giving yourself space, right? Totally. Yeah, I love that. Like one of the things I'm hearing is like slowing down a little, right? Instead of letting.
It's really hard to do. It's not easy.
Yeah.
When you're feeling like really like jazzed up about it, but
yeah, totally.
It's been helpful for me.
Yeah. And I mean, I think one of the things, and again, you tell me where I'm wrong here, but one of the things I saw shifting in you is, again, in the earlier times, you were judging your feelings a lot, right? And which only makes them worse, as we've talked about, right? So instead of judging it, part of what I'm hearing is you got a lot better at kind of, I want to say, honoring them, like making space for them to exist, and then kind of turning towards them maybe, and what you just called kind of processing them. Yeah. Which is very different than like, I wish they weren't here, they shouldn't be here, like, and then like acting out of them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like much more conscious.
Yeah. And toward the end of our time, we addressed how to handle feelings with your hubby, like how to communicate the feelings, those hard feelings that were coming up for you in the moment. Do you want to say a little bit about what we talked about and how that's going for you?
kind of just like, instead of shutting down and not being able to say anything, be able to like identify my emotions and just start with maybe stating those and telling my husband how I feel in that moment as kind of like a way to break down that wall and be able to like have a conversation about it.
Yes. Right. And as you're like recognizing those feelings and even just if all you do then is articulate, this is what I'm feeling. That in and of itself is a way of, I would say, coming closer to yourself and like acknowledging what's going on for you without like trying to fight it. Right.
Yeah.
And, yeah, like it is a way, and this might sound a little out there for some people who haven't been here and done this, but it is a way of coming closer into yourself, of like bringing a little loving intimacy to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was nice. It was like, I've definitely used it, with like pretty good results. Just, it kind of allows me to just kind of break down this block I have.
Yeah.
And have like better conversations and be more vulnerable.
Yeah. I love it. That's cool. Great. So is there anything else, like anything that you thought you might want to offer, or any last tidbits around your experience developing more self-love?
Yeah. The other thing I think that I have worked on quite a bit is like, I just am one of those people who's like really busy, and I like to have like lists of things that I'm doing. And one thing I've really been working on that's helped is to kind of evaluate my chore list better. So if I can't come up with a good reason that I'm doing it for like either myself, my dogs, or my family and friends, then I just say, okay, that's something that I don't need to waste time and energy on. And I just kind of am able to move on, which has helped me a lot in feeling calmer and like more loving about the things I do in my life.
Yes. Yeah. Cause sometimes we get into these modes, and I know this was for you, like, it's like the go, 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 like take task, all the things I have to do. But then we don't create the space, especially as highly sensitive women. Like there's just some fact to like, as living in a sensitive body, nervous system, like we need more time than some other people to kind of replenish. And that can mean like quiet time to ourselves, but it also can mean like for you, it's like going to the garden and gardening, or
Yeah, but I tended to think of everything as a chore. Like even working in my garden in the beginning was a chore. Yeah, I liked it, but it was just like I thought of it as something that I had to get done.
Yes.
And that needed to get done. And when I was out there, it was like, I'm just trying to get this done kind of thing. Whereas now I'm like, okay, I am going to go work in my garden. Like, this is something I'm doing for myself because I like the way it looks. I like, being out here listening to podcasts or whatever while I pull weeds. And so like, I'm doing this for myself. So I feel better about it, and not like it's a chore, like it's something I'm doing for me.
Yes, totally. And then what I'm hearing is that actually when you allow that for yourself, then it also is a benefit to your marriage.
Yeah. I mean, it has been very much so, because my husband oftentimes feels overwhelmed by the number of things I place on the to-do list. And so if I'm able to evaluate better, then he can ask me, okay, like, what do we really need to get done? Or what do you really want to get done? And I am able to be like, okay, well, we don't have to do this, this, and this. Like, and he feels better about it.
Yes, totally. I love that.
And it's me being like putting things on the list, like like the good things, like, well, we need to have time to like go downtown and get a beer and listen to music.
Totally. The fun things.
Yeah. I just would have left those off.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing, like you really honoring yourself more instead of just like sort of almost like being a slave to your like task list.
Yeah.
Is like really creating more fun and love and good times in your marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it's the things that are important to him too. So
yeah. I love it. That's so cool. So do you like tell me a little bit about how coaching supported you in this and like why that was, or if and why it was maybe instrumental in these shifts?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I do think it was really helpful. Like, these things had all been things I've been trying to work on for a while or knew I needed to work on. But having like a one-on-one coach was, able to provide ideas and evaluate like why I was acting in some ways that I just couldn't really see great,
Yeah.
And then having that sounding board and someone who understands and is similar to me just like really helped to change my thoughts and like actions over time.
Yeah. I love that. And from where you are now, as a sensitive person who's moved through a lot of the bigger humps that we can have, right, in our marriages and just inside of ourselves, how important do you think that, making these sorts of shifts in self-acceptance and self-worth and self-love is for other sensitive women?
Yeah. For me, I'm just in a much happier, much better place with both myself and my relationship than I was, like 6-7 months ago.
Yeah.
And I really like want other sensitive women to like be able to feel that, as well as just kind of feel like less stuck in their life. Because that's what I felt before, I felt kind of stuck, like it wasn't going to change and it was hopeless. And that's how I felt in my marriage. And that just wasn't like a great place to be.
Yeah.
Having like a one-on-one coach and like get you feeling like better soon.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's been a true pleasure to support you and just, I always love like hearing your little reports back about, we've had such a great week and like your wins. And even when there were little challenges and like how you were able to like look back retroactively and like grow from that. It was just so fun to watch and support you and be part of that.
Yeah, so. Thank you. It's been really good. And I was very happy to have you.
I'm sure everyone else who's listening is very happy to hear your story and hear your little drops of wisdom and insight. So thank you so much for being here and sharing with all of us. And for all of you listening, I hope that this conversation with Kathryn has given you some good insights and has given you some hope and has helped you even just a little bit move the needle on getting out of I suck syndrome and into more self-love or hope for more self-love and from better communication, because we all know how important both of those things are, self-love and communication, are in our marriages. Now, of course, the best way that I know to create this kind of change in your marriage, to make your marriage what you are wanting it to be, whether those are small changes or large sweeping changes, is to come coach with me. Right now, the only way you can coach with me is in my program, Treasured. You're going to learn all the things that Kathryn did, plus more. And I want you to know all about it and to make a really informed decision about whether this program, Treasured, is a good decision for you, is the right next step for you in your marriage. So I recently created a podcast episode with questions and answers all about it. It's just a couple episodes back, so take a look at that if you're interested in Treasured. Or you can really just dive right in to the description page, which is over at my website at www.lifeisworthloving.com/treasured, or you can find it on the menu bar at coachwithme:/treasured. I cannot wait for those of you who are ready to join me and who are ready to really revolutionize your marriage for just in the best of ways to dive in. I'm just so looking forward to it and watching your amazing growth and change and the successes you're going to have. All right, my friends, be oh so well and see you soon.